Κλειστό είναι, δεν νομίζω ότι θέλει το τηλέφωνο. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, dear friends, it is my great pleasure to start this conference. I would like to invite first the rector of the University of Cyprus, Professor Konstantinos Christofidis, for his inaugural speech.
Good afternoon. It's okay, I mean, this is... So, distinguished guests, and dear colleagues, and dear students, dear friends, dear ambassador, it is a distinct pleasure to welcome you all to the second international conference on the historical perspective of Jewish presence in Cyprus and the Hellenic world from the 19th century to the creation of the State of Israel. This event is part of the Jewish Studies project presently under the Department of History and Archaeology of the University of Cyprus. This department is a dynamic and vibrant unit of our young university, from which we have great expectations. I am pleased to say that this academic event, as well as others that have preceded and yet others that will follow, form a precious chain enriching the life of the university. I am pleased with the way the Jewish Studies project has developed. The project was officially launched in 2013 with the active encouragement and support of the Embassy of the Republic of Israel. Thank you very much, my dear friend Michael Harari. Initially, its focus and content was mainly in teaching aspects of common Jewish and Cypriot Hellenic content. From the start, the University of Cyprus assumed an equal share in the cost of the project. We saw the project as a bridge uniting the people of the two republics, Israel and Cyprus. As the rector of the university, an academic and personally as a citizen of Cyprus, I believe deeply in fostering a deeper understanding of the problem and concerns of the two people. When one understands the problem confronting us, mutually beneficial solutions are easily found. The teaching content of the Jewish Studies project has in late 2017 taken on a research site. An associate of this initiative began collecting testimonies from individuals that have been involved in the support of the Jewish Holocaust refugees in the British internment camps. This new research initiative is a welcome addition to the project. The aim of the university education is not simply to communicate knowledge. Its other, deeper effect is to widen the mindsets of the students and bridge them to contact with new ideas and new approaches. Education, and university education most of all, is the beginning of a voyage of discovery, an activity that widens the minds and deepens understanding. On a personal note, I am also very pleased that I have witnesses and play a part, of course with my colleague George, in all stages of the Jewish Studies project today, from its birth and its development to this, the second international conference. And actually we have also new projects for the next few months. It is very rewarding to see such quality academic output develop in short few years. It is pleasant to know I have participated in this effort. It is an added bonus to see among the speakers some of the main movers for the project's establishment and development. With the agreement of the organizers, I would like to dedicate this academic event to the almost 2,000 Jewish children that were born in Cyprus in the British internment camps. Children born to couples trying to rebuild their lives after the horror of the Holocaust. I wish every success to the conference, and thank you everybody to be here today. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I forgot my manners. I forgot to say that my name is George Kazamias and I'm the de facto convener of the Jewish Studies project. I would like now to invite Ambassador Kakouris. Ambassador is the director of the Middle Eastern unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Ambassador.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Kazamias. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be with you here this afternoon. You didn't come to listen to me, so I will be very, very brief. But just to say that it's a pleasure. I've looked at the program, and it is indeed a most interesting program, one that I'm looking forward at least this afternoon to hearing the speakers. On a personal note, if I may just add, it's a pleasure to see good friend and colleague Michael Harari back in Cyprus, and look forward, Michael, to hearing you too. As Director of the Middle East and North Africa Division at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, these are programs which are interesting for us to follow as well. We have seen over recent years the relationship between Cyprus and Israel, no small measure because of Michael's efforts, blossom, and in one particular area being the trilateral mechanisms that we have with Israel, Greece and Cyprus. And within that, the issue of the diaspora as well has been picked up. So that's a field that my ministry is particularly interested too. But just to say thank you again for inviting me, and I look forward to welcoming those who can attend a dinner that we're hosting at the ministry tomorrow evening. Best wishes for the conference. Thank you.
Now, Professor Yossi Benarji, who is the other member of the organizing committee. I would like to invite him to say a few words for the opening of the conference.
Thank you, George. You always surprise me. Like this time, I didn't prepare anything to say, so I wouldn't say. You're going to hear me in a minute, and then we'll be all together tomorrow. But this is a very good chance to really thank so much from really the bottom of my heart, at least personally, and I guess on behalf of all of us, of all of the group here, to George, Professor George Kazamias, and to Evangelia, who was the, as I define her, as the engine behind all the event here, and she invested a lot of efforts and day and night, and she was working so hard to convene all these people here, and I'm sure that we are going to have a fantastic day and a half. We say in Hebrew, Yom Shishi HaKatzar, the shortest Friday, but tomorrow she planned for us a very long Friday. I know that some people maybe will not be able to attend, but they will follow up. And this is really gonna be one of the most interesting event in researching both the field of the Jewish presence in Cyprus and the framework of the Jews in the Hellenistic world of 19th and early 20th century. So really, I'm really thankful for the organizers. I'm really thankful for the welcome of the rector, the second time of the rector of the university. Actually, we are gathering here for the second time, the same venue. And also, it's a place to thank Ambassador Harari, who was behind the curtain in the first meeting, and now you are coming as a participant. So maybe some of the people here will go there, vice versa, and some of them will come and be an ambassador in the future. So thank you very much right from the beginning. We'll have enough time to thank tomorrow at the end, but this is the proper opportunity. I know how much did you work for that. So thank you, and I really wish all of us to have a fantastic day and a half. Thank you very much.
Now it is my turn to say a few words. This conference almost did not happen. We were plagued by financial worries, along with the country and the humanities and social sciences in Europe and the world. Human power shortages hinders us, as we are a small department. To top everything, further complications happened, as we are a few days from the second and final round of the presidential election. And political events always play a role, impact on academic such. In this stormy sea of trouble and potential trouble, we were nonetheless fortunate in having the clear and constant support of certain sponsors. I want to pay tribute to the rector of the University of Cyprus, Professor Konstantinos Christofidis, who's here with us, who has always been an unwavering pillar of support for the Jewish Studies project. He was there for us even when we ourselves wavered. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cyprus has supported the conference, and it is hosting the closing dinner tomorrow night. We wish to offer them our heartfelt thanks for both gestures. Our department, the Department of History and Archaeology, has graciously provided added financial support when we asked. And of course, we thank the Archaeological Research Unit of the department for granting us the use of these premises for the conference. In the difficult financial circumstances Cyprus is going through, we gratefully acknowledge all support. Turning to this conference, I wish to thank all speakers for coming to join us from Greece, Israel, France, and Cyprus. I also wish to thank the academic chairs who accepted to chair the sessions both today and tomorrow. I'm sure it will prove to be an academically challenging and rewarding conference. We also hope to be able to publish the proceedings in a special volume. Professor Yossi Benerji, a member of our academic committee, has been constantly helpful and has supported us in the most difficult, the bleak times of the preparation of the conference. Yossi, we wish to thank you. Last but not least, I want to thank Dr. Evangelia Matsopoulou, Associate of the project and Associate Curator of the Bank of Cyprus Historical Archive. She has accepted a large share of the organizational needs of this conference, including communication and publication of information for it. She has grappled with practical issues with gusto, and I believe very successfully. Thank you, Evangelia. Lastly, as the record has said, we wish to dedicate this conference to the 2,200 odd children born in the British internment camps of Cyprus from couples fleeing the horrors of the then recent past. Part of the then future capital of the State of Israel were born in Cyprus. Enough talk by me. We now begin the main part of the conference. We start with the keynote speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Michael Harari. former ambassador of the Republic of Israel and a very good friend of the project. He was the person who came up with the name of the Jewish Studies Project and of the university as well. So we're happy that he could be here, and we wish to welcome him to the podium.
Well, good afternoon, good evening. I'm very proud and excited to be here. To be honest, let's say it's a bit. Well, I spent quite some time here in Cyprus for 5 years as an ambassador. I think I know Cyprus and many friends here quite well, and I'm very proud to be here as well as under the Jewish Studies program. And you must know, I'm sure, that without very few dedicated people who join forces with an idea, you can't implement such an idea. So I would like to thank very much an excellent friend, the rector of the university, dear Kostas, for joining forces, for believing with the importance of bringing education as close as possible for both people, and for you guys, for George, for pushing it ahead and implementing it. Basically I have an argument. I mean, this is my presentation. My argument is that education and culture cooperation is an essential component in strengthening strategic relations. It's an argument because, well, I will be very much happy to have your views later on in the discussion, of course. On my way here to Cyprus, when I prepared my brief presentation, I did ask myself very bizarre question. Maybe I do exaggerate with the importance of cultural and educational cooperation. How much it is important for pushing ahead or enhancing strategic cooperation? The answer, of course, is that we do not exaggerate, but really it came across my mind. And while I was preparing this presentation, I came across a speech, very interesting speech by Federica Mogherini, the Foreign Minister, if I may put it this way, of the EU, almost 2 years ago, when she was presenting to the European Parliament the necessity to adopt strategy for culture in the external relations of the EU. And with your permission, I will read just a few sentences, because I think it states quite a lot before I will. She explains the importance of bringing ahead strategy for culture in the EU external relations. A strategy because it is not a time for improvising. This is one of the great issues in our foreign policy, and it deserves to be treated as such, Mogherini says. The task is huge, she says. Cultural diplomacy is about conversation, but it is also about innovation and new ideas. It is about education, security, human development, history. If we truly want to put culture at the core of our foreign policy, then we need the whole of Europe to get on board with all its expertise. And the last sentence, she said, put culture at the very heart of Europe's external action, refuse any clash of civilization, and work for an alliance of civilization. Cultural diplomacy is not just a hobby for intellectuals. It is a cornerstone in our relationship with today's world. It is vital for Europe to promote our interests and our values. I believe that Israel and Cyprus is an excellent example of the importance of cultural and educational cooperation. I think for many aspects, both countries, for too many years, ignored in a way each other, ignored in the sense that they did not implement the full potential of the importance of this relationship. Of course, there are many reasons for that. It is not to say that there was no cooperation before, but I think being so close with so much mutual interest, I mean, it didn't make very much sense. It is correct, of course, that common interest, common political, economical, strategic interest came ahead and basically pushed ahead this kind of cooperation, of course. But this is exactly my argument, that educational and cultural cooperation, it is very much essential to strengthen these relations, these strategic relations. They do help, they do assist, let's say, they do not, or to put it this way, they do not compete with interest, but in a way they complete them, they enhance them, and definitely I think that it enables both of us, both people, both governments, both individuals, to understand each other much better, and I think to understand our sensitivities much better, and in a way to be able to solve or ease disagreements or challenges we may face. I'm not going to list, of course, I mean, all the very rich doing in many fields in the last many years here between Israel and Cyprus, research, education, art, archaeology, history, theater, etc., etc., etc. I would like to focus on one topic, which, of course, you are very much familiar with it, and it's going to be very much major part in this conference, the British detention camps in Cyprus between 1946 and 1949. This is a very central chapter in our history, I mean in Israel history. You know that between these years, around 70,000 illegal immigrants or survivors of the Holocaust tried to come to the state of Israel before its establishment and after that, and about 52,000 of them, they came here to Cyprus. This is a major and a central chapter in the history of Israel, which for Cyprus and for many within the Cypriot people have had part of it. I'm sure that you know that these days in Israel there's an exhibition in Tel Aviv, which, by the way, my wife curated. This is a coincidence. So I promote it a bit. Which I am astonished, to be honest, let's say, of so much interest with this exhibition. So many people come and visit. So many people, let's say, refresh their memories, their relative memories, their children, of course, and they come with so many initiatives concerning, of course, this topic. I do hear about so many people who come to Cyprus for touring these, let's say, sites. I think at the mid of February it's going to be a delegation from Bar Ilan University of 40 professors who come here as well. A few days ago I was approached with an idea to have in Cyprus here a new interactive museum which will deal with this concept. Basically, my point is that through this chapter in our history, in our common history, okay, with different, of course, part of this history, I think that both people can appreciate much more each history and what can we learn out of it. Just to sum up, does cultural and educational cooperation influence, I suppose, or assist governments to cooperate? The answer, of course, is yes. Is it some kind of insurance that our relations between Cyprus and Israel will not face different challenges in the future? Of course it is not. But I think, as I said, that it does contribute very much for understanding each other much better. And in any ways, I suppose it's quite interesting to deal with these kind of topics than many other topics. Thank you very much.
Now, I think we will not take questions now, but we can have all the questions afterwards. So
you can go on with questions because it's different issues. So maybe
okay, let then have a part of the Q&A session now. Well, I would like to use the chair's prerogative and ask Michael Harari whether he thinks, I'm pleased that you're not no longer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so I can ask you all sorts of questions, including things about the relationship of Israel and Turkey. How do you think this, given that all states have got to think of their own national good first? How do you think can this go ahead, given that Turkey is now going through a phase of, shall we call it introversy, or a difficult phase anyway, difficult to find common ground with? Yes, exactly with the relations between Turkey and Israel.
Well, I think this is quite an easy question, to be honest, let's say. I'm sure that you remember that during my time as an ambassador, I used to say that I do believe that it is very much possible, let's say, to have an excellent relations with Cyprus and a good relations with Turkey. And I'm sure that you will listen very well to this nuance. My point is that this is not a zero-sum game. And basically, I think that we can have both. We can face with these challenges quite well. You're right, very much. Developments in Turkey are quite interesting. I mean, and quite challenging, I suppose. Yes, and the dialogue between Israel and Turkey these days, well, it does exist. I think with not a lot of success, to be honest. Let's say because of the very much well-known reasons. Because Turkey is going through its own way. I think it is important to have this dialogue in order to be able to at least to discuss what can be done, what cannot be done. I'm very happy to see that the relations between Cyprus and Israel remain so good, so excellent, no matter how many, how many, let's say, challenges around us, or how many developments around us, took place. And I think that we were able to prove that by understanding very much our common interests and common values, and by having an open society, pluralistic society, relations between democracies are different. We can have a very wide range of dialogue, not only between governments, but between our people, between our education institutions, between our young generation. And by that, even though we may disagree about A, B, or C, we are able to look at the wider picture and the complete picture in a very, to be honest, let's say very constructive way.
Thank you. Any other questions for Professor Harari? Yes, please.
My name is Professor Yitzchak Kerem. We don't really know. I'm a historian on Sfaradim, illegal immigration, the Holocaust, Greece, etc. There's a museum in Silo Timbu but it's not official. It's, one very energetic woman made it. From your observations, though, not to put you on the spot, but I don't see, or at this stage, maybe a challenge for the future is commemoration. But until now, there's a classical museum down the road, but I don't see a museum and any significant ethnic commemoration in Cyprus. And why do you think there is that stunt? And how do you think that the society can change to accommodate the multi-diverse reality? I think it'll be better for Cyprus, but for many years there was a vacuum here, and that's why we didn't come and we didn't pay attention. And now there's a switch. Okay, the Jews and the Israelis and all sorts of ethnicities are focusing on things. They're very a lot of these issues are very delicate, of course, because still unsolved problems of divided island. But how would you analyze in a nutshell the past of a reticence to deal with a certain ethnicity, and what changes do you see that are going to happen, and how do you think Cyprus can proceed to change it and to really get on the map?
I think it is a process. It is a process of pushing big project or things ahead. But to be honest, I think, I was a student the last few years as well of this topic of the detention camps. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think in Israel as well, it was in a way, the Cypriot angle, a bit of forgotten angle. Which means that I suppose you need time, you need few people who do understand the importance of moving ahead. And once one or two or three projects take place, I think it's easier then to push forward the rest. We should be impatient and patient as well. In the sense that in order to establish the Jewish Studies program, it didn't take too much, to be honest with you, to convince Kostas, of course, but I suppose both countries, both people needed the time in order to digest the geography and the history and the importance of doing such projects. And then here now, after a few years, you can see that are more people who are involved, more people did their PhD about this topic. If you asked me a few years ago how many people will be of interest of doing the research on this specific topic, well, I would be very much surprised to see that. And it is taking place. There is much more interest in Israel as well, not only in Cyprus, on both sides. So I look at it from very positive and optimistic, let's say, way, that yes, of course, there are a lot of things to be done. Silotimbo, Limassol, whatever, of course, yes. So we should keep ourselves quite busy with new projects and new, let's say, innovative ideas in order to go ahead. Thank you.
I must here say something about, which again is about Ambassador Harari. He was the person who persuaded me to jump into the pool, and then said, if you jump into the pool, then you can persuade more easily other people that it's a worthwhile project. I'm sure it was a very good piece of advice. And with the help of the rector, we pushed it ahead. But I can see now that the mental process that led him first to suggest this. Thank you. Other questions?
Victor Karayanis from Derinya. My village play a key role in the help of escaping of the Jewish people from Cyprus. And as the ambassador said, this part of the history is put in shade even in Israel, also in Cyprus. And I only found today that my village play a key role in this part of the history. And I want to ask if you know the reason why this part is in shade. Why people avoid to talk about it.
I don't say that people avoided talking about it. I think if you look at it from, again, from the historical point of view of in Israel, those who came to Cyprus were Holocaust survivors. They went through a horror before they approached these shores. This chapter, I think, in Cyprus, it is uncomparable, I suppose, to what happened in the Holocaust. Then they came to Israel, and they did take part in establishing the State of Israel. So it did make sense, if this is the right, let's say, phrase to say that for quite a lot of years, the focus was much more on other, let's say, very difficult, things to digest. And just after a while, it takes time. It takes time for the human people, I suppose, for us, to be able to remind yourself with more chapters. And then this is the beauty, I think, of history and education. Once we are more available, I suppose, in a way, for analyzing and reminding and searching and researching, we can, let's say, put a light on this kind of chapter. And this is the beauty of it. This is why I'm so happy that in the last few years there is much more interest, let's say, in Israel and in Cyprus, and many things still remain to be done. This is the beauty of it.
Any other questions? Thank you.
There is also a tragic aspect in our relations with the Jewish people. Once the Zionist movement tried to conquer Cyprus. So having a museum in the camps of Xilodimbu is one thing we can do. We can also commemorate this aspect. What should we do about it? Should we say we don't know about it? We know about it. Then the Zionist movement changed their opinion, and they went to the Asian land. We respect the Jews. It's an Asian people like the Greeks. But there was this page in our history. It was good for us that the Zionist movement changed their opinion. It was not good for Palestine. What I know, you know. What should we do about it? Should we say we don't know? It was not a tragedy for us, it was a tragedy for Palestine. I will not use another word because I used it before a few days, the word genocide for Palestine. Some Jews protested. Maybe they were right, they are more sensitive. But things are like that. You can even say it isn't genocide. Anyway, that's how things they are.
Well, to be honest, I'm not aware of the Zionism trying to conquer Cyprus. But again, as I said before, I mean, this is why it is so much important to study history and to shed a light about different kind of chapters. And I think having differences about, or different, let's say, interpretations, this is very much important. The Palestinian angle is a different one. I think, I mean, okay, we can have the whole seminar on that, and even, yeah. But again, I would like to emphasize, I think, as I said before, it does not mean that we have no differences, neither between Israel and Cyprus or between Israel and the States of America. It doesn't matter, and between Israelis and between Cypriots. The most important thing is to be open enough, and I suppose brave enough, to dig further down and to research and to understand as much as possible as we can understand what did happen and what are the lessons for that. This is the most important lesson, at least from my point of view. Thanks.
And if I may add, have a frank and open discussion of problems. That's the only way to, in the United States, they now have a problem with a memo that the president may or may not have seen. But what they say that we have to bring it out in the open to have a discussion about it. I think this is generally the way to face problems, difficult problems or sensitive problems in the bilateral or multilateral relations. Now it's the turn of Professor Yossi Benartzi, who will speak about the Jewish presence between 1883 and 1938, a historical overview. Yes.
Just waiting for the presentation. 1 minute. And I don't see the front. There is a chapter about your question there in the presentation. So, no, really, I mean it. The word conquer is not right, but there was some Zionist idea regarding Cyprus, not to conquer Cyprus. Nobody can conquer Cyprus, it belongs to the Cypriots. But I'll take you back to history. It's always much convenient to go back to history than to deal with nowadays problems. Even though we would like to discuss everything, sometimes it's better to think about the roots and how it all began. And since this conference is actually divided between two main topics, a bit far history, if we may say so, about the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, and then almost half of the conference is regarding the camps and the issue of the camps, and we'll have enough time to discuss it maybe after the two coming lectures and tomorrow toward the end. Some of the questions, Professor Kerem, that you raised are it's really an issue nowadays, both in Israel and in Cyprus. As Ambassador said, it's something that we have to discuss more and more, and such meeting is really an evidence that things are getting better, because last time we were here about 12 to 15 people. Now look at this room, and next time we're going to be in the maybe in the auditorium of the museum on the other side of the street. So actually, due to the idea of having this kind of meetings and conferences and this program of Jewish studies, I believe that there is at least from research point of view, quite a long way to go together. And throughout this way, we'll have to discuss both historical issues and even current matters that will has something to touch with the history, as we say before. This is to the right. Yeah. So I'd like to concentrate mainly, and also it goes back to the question about Piroi. I'll show a little bit about it later. I would like to share with you something, or a couple of things that really remained on the field in Cyprus, not regarding the camps. I will say no word about the camps in my presentation. There is enough time for that tomorrow. But I would like to share with you the short history of the Jews in Cyprus, from Zionist point of view and from the geographical location of Cyprus and 19th century Palestine. Because we can ask actually what brought Jews to Cyprus at the end of the 19th century. Why were they looking here? Whether they are looking for Zionists, if they were pre-Zionists or Zionists from the Zionist organization, of course the target was and remained and was the land of Israel or Palestine or Jerusalem or anything else which should attract Jews for thousands of years. So there were, of course, coincidence of a lot of events and geographical situation which brought about some trials and some attempts to settle groups of Jews in Cyprus on the way to Palestine. So there are connections between the geographical locations and the connection between the historical situation which took place at the end of the 19th century in Cyprus, and of course the very fact that the British took rule of Cyprus from 1878 in different ways of ruling Cyprus, and some of them are still here, as you know. So the British authority has also a lot to do with these historical events, which I'd like to show you. All in all, there were about 3 waves and attempts of settling groups of Jews, not too many of them, in Cyprus. There were some which took place not far away from Paphos in Koklia west, so to speak. Some of which took place in, this is the pointer, I guess, in not far away from Piroi, which is just mentioned, in Margot Chiflik, and then in Cholemchi, and then in another Kuklia of the, I'll show it later on in a more detailed map, the location of these attempts. And there was 3 attempts of waves of settling agricultural Jewish colonies in Cyprus, one really political or if you want, a political scheme. And there were even ideas to settle Jews in Cyprus throughout Second World War to rescue some of those who were persecuted in Germany in the mid-1930s and later on in the beginning of the 40s. I think that the key point is to understand the situation that you all know, that Britain actually occupied Cyprus in this way at the beginning by virtue of the Anglo-Turkish Convention signed in June 1878 in Berlin, and then the strategy is the whole strategy of attracting investments and immigrants to Cyprus. It will be mentioned tomorrow as well, but I just want to right now to put this fact also on the table. The strategy of the rulers, the British commissioners and rulers of Cyprus, was very clear. They didn't want to attract resources from the capital. They wanted, as you know, in any other region of the world in which they had their colonies, to exploit the colonies themselves and to maybe to send some revenues to the capital or to the motherland, so to speak. So the strategy was to attract settlers, not only Jews, at that period. And maybe some of you know that there were Maltese and people from Sudan. Still, there are families from Sudan in the village of Kuklia, if you go there, in the occupied territory of nowadays. And people from Armenia, the Duchovers, some of them on the way to Canada went over Cyprus. Some of them remained here for a few years. And so the idea of attracting immigrants, settlers, and to bring investment to Cyprus was a kind of the, the practice of any colonialist and any imperialist power. So that is a must, a background. Everyone should know that. Otherwise, there was no way to connect Jewish presence in Cyprus to the history of this island. The first attempt took place in 1883. Now, the second point, which is very important, is not just the British rule in Cyprus, but also the situation in Palestine. Sorry that I can't see everybody there on the other side of the room. But on the other side of the sea, not far away, 250 kilometers on the sea, Palestine, they were under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. And the first emigration wave to Palestine, which took place in 1882, was blocked by those authorities in 1883. So some groups who were on the way to Palestine were stuck on the shores of Lebanon, in Latakia, and were sent. They were sent originally by English society, which was a kind, not really missionaries, but a kind of a British millenarist group who sent the, due to their belief, about millenarism and the whole assumption that one condition for the second coming of the Messiah is the revelation of the Jews. So the revelation of the Jews must take place in their own motherland, in Palestine. So let's help some of the pre-Zionist groups and some of the Jews who wanted to go to Palestine and settle there as one of the preconditions for the revelation, the second coming of the Messiah. So this, so to speak, Christian society, a bit missionary society, they didn't try to convert Jews, but they were very Christian motivated in their activity. They sent these groups. So what happened when they were stuck in Latakia? Hop, in Cyprus there was suddenly a British rule. So we can deal with the governor of Cyprus at that time and send this first group to the other side of the sea, and this time Larnaca. From Larnaca they went to Paphos. From Paphos they went up to the mountain of Orides, and they tried to settle there. They failed after a very, very short time. No one of them even had an idea about what is agriculture or how to live in a village or so. So they failed in everything they did there. They were not welcome by the environmental conditions. They were not acquainted with the Mediterranean climate. Some of them died after a couple of months. The rest of them asked to pre-Zionist organization to rescue them and take them either back to London or to Russia or to any other place, just not Cyprus. So this first attempt failed, and they left already in summer 1884. Other Jews from Romania who were convinced that there was quite a Zionist or pre-Zionist movement in Romania. Some of them established the two first settlements by Haifa, Zichron Yaakov and Rosh Pina, and some other groups on the way were persuaded to land in Larnaca. They were sent again with the assistance of the British authorities to Kuklia. All of them left, but 4 families who remained for a couple of months once again. And this trial or this attempt, which was almost abandoned, not just the camps are abandoned from our collective memory. Nobody would know in Israel about group of Jewish settlers in old Paphos, you know, in Kuklia, by the museum there. And this was described by Dr. Nir is a geologist, by the way, but his grandfather was the manager of the settlement in Margot, which I'll mention in a minute. So he, though he is a geologist, he made a very good historical research and published a paper about, you see the geographical scene of this event, not far away from Paphos. This is the landscape from the mountain. And just try to imagine a couple of Russian Jews who fled from Russia to East London, who were sent by the English or the British mission to old Paphos and to Kuklia, and then up to the mountain of Orides. They had no chance to survive there, and there is no even one stone. They didn't have, actually they didn't even have some house over there. They left in some barracks, which some of them were put in fire later on. But this is the place between all the Paphos or Paleo Paphos and Mount Orides. The only thing which remained is in this museum in Kuklia of, as you can see, Rabbi Yekutiel. His tombstone is still in, it was here, by the way, in the museum of about 100 meters from here for many years, and then they sent the stone back, and nowadays people who are coming there are invited to see the stone. We have to work on that, and you see we bring our student and we show them this is the only relic of the Jewish presence in this part of the world. The second attempt took place a couple of years later, at the beginning of the 1890s. Again, due to the situation in Palestine, due to the situation on the shores of Jaffa, where the Ottoman authorities prevent Jews from A, immigration to Palestine, B, purchasing land, some of the groups who were on the way decided to try Cyprus. One of them, which was named Ahavat Zion, the love of Zion, negotiated with some dealer in Larnaca, and they purchased a piece of land by the support of the Jewish Colonization Association. They lent them some money, and they even sent a welcome committee to absorb the first 15 families toward the end or the summer of 1898. And from September 97 to 1900, some people settled there with their families. They failed once again. Some of the first child who died there, he was the first to be died in the cemetery that I'll show you later on in Margot of nowadays, on the border of the occupied territories. And this is how the Jews arrived Margot area. This is the place. At that time, it was a very good location, by the way. The land maybe is not so fertile as in other places in Cyprus, but it's on the midway. You see Larnaca, the old way, not the nowadays motorway, but on the way from Larnaca to Nicosia, not far away from the village of Piroi, which was mentioned, and they purchased a piece of land there and settled there for a couple of months, and then the Jewish Colonization Association was left with land at hand and, let's say, evacuated the farm. So they decided to take responsibility and to initiate the development of a new Jewish settlement region by Margot. By the way, again, you have to really think about the parallel event which took place in Cyprus in this case and the Jewish Colonization Association in Palestine. Exactly on January 1, 1900, Jewish Colonization Association took responsibility from Baron Rothschild with a gift of 15 million francs of that time, quite a lot of money. And with this gift, they initiated 25 years of activity in Palestine. And the same methods, the same clerk, the same administration, the same agriculture, you can combine, you can compare what they did in establishing the Eastern Lower Galilee Jewish region, places that for the Israelis will mean a lot, like Kfar Tavor and Yavnel and Sejera, and you can just copy the same landscape, became the landscape of Margot, and the same method, a center village. In our case, it was Yavnel or Kfar Tavor. In this case, it was Margot, and then they purchased settlement or piece of land to create daughter settlements. So to spare means and not to invent or to invest a lot of money in each different and in a far away distributed settlements, they created actually a block or a region of Jewish settlement area with one center village and daughter villages, which will take the services, the public services from the center, and will cultivate the land in this area. This is why they purchased another piece of land by Kuklia, this time Kuklia East, and in Cholmekchi or Cholemkchi, which was at that time a kind of a chiftlik, which was cultivated by some Cypriot Turks families. So it became a mixed village, and Kuklia was a mixed village between Greek and Turkish Cypriots. And this is why, and then came the Jewish families, so there was actually a mixed village in Kuklia for many years. These are the places. You can see Margot, and then to the north of it, on the fences of the military barracks there, Cholemkchi. I think it's an agriculture farm nowadays, and Kuklia. This is the Margot, and it's a region, an old map, and this was the settlement Kuklia East, as I defined it. Now that became a real Jewish settlement area. Whether they wanted to settle there and to remain for the rest of their life and the coming generation, it's still to be negotiated. There is a very interesting issue here. They were Zionists, but they were prevented from going to Palestine. When they had the opportunity to do it, let's say 1919, they remained in Cyprus. They remained loyal to their land, to their village, and to their neighbors, and they lived in peace with their neighbors, so they thought the second generation will remain there. But the second generation, which grew up in a Jewish, or let's say even Hebrew, with the language, there was a teacher from Palestine who sent to teach them Hebrew. They were reading the newspapers which came from Jaffa or Jerusalem. And step by step, they created a kind of a Jewish presence and a Jewish, let's say, kind of a Jewish or Zionist, if you prefer to define them like that, in Cyprus, establishing farms, establishing school, kindergarten, pharmacy, synagogue, and of course, unfortunately, also cemetery, which later on became the cemetery of the detainees from the camps who were buried not permanently because they were removed to Israel later on. And this archaeological development is very impressive. They had quite a success from agricultural point of view for many years. They were supported by the Jewish Colonization Association, and they actually, no, you can't see it, it's not a good slide, but this is a kind of a report from 1915 with all the names of the families and the crops and the yields and the taxes and the money that they sold their land. So we can trace exactly the families and to come at, or to understand that actually that was the peak of this settlement, by the way, was during the First World War, due to the fact that Cyprus was in a way more safe or more secure than Palestine, which became a battlefield in 1915 and then 1917, which when it was conquered by the British forces. Then Cyprus became a kind of a place into which Jews from Palestine, from Jaffa, found here also shelter, some of them in the Jewish agricultural colonies and some of them in Larnaca and even in Nicosia, a few families. So in a way, you can see that until the end of the 1920s, there was a real Jewish presence as a agricultural area in Cyprus. Later on, as I said before, the second generation decided to go to Zion, to Palestine. And it's me. I move it. Sorry. And then gradually, family by family, just left. They got the compensation. They left. Most of them went to Palestine. Some of them became even very, very well-known people. At least the trainer and manager of the Israeli football team, national team, Yosele Merimovic, he was born in Margot. His family is from Margot, and some other people made very good agriculture. Sorry? Huh? You see, we are talking about culture and things like that. And Margot was sold, by the way, to some Lieutenant Colonel Greiswood. I don't know if somebody heard the name here, or this is you for sure, you know. But this is another puzzle still to be researched about this person. His son was very famous because he was the voice of the BBC throughout Second World War. You know, all announcements throughout the war about what's happening in the European fields. But was the son. And his archive, by the way, is a closed archive in Georgetown University in the United States. I don't know why, but they didn't let me access to this. I don't know what kind of secrets on Cyprus does he have there. Because his father tried to create here a kind of a British estate on the land of Margot. And then a Jewish settler came from South Russia of the time. You can see this person, Yefim Weiner, who was the last settler in Margot, which died in 1945, but his family came to visit the place and cultivated and held a piece of land there until 1967. And they are now spread all over the world, but they still have their, and some of them are, of course, in Israel. You can see that that was Margot in the year 1932, when a very famous Israeli person, Yosef Weitz, who was the head of the Jewish National Fund, came to study in Cyprus how to make good plantations in Palestine. He was actually after the carob trees and after the old forestation process which took place. He was the manager of the forestry department of the JNF, and he came to Cyprus to study. So he went to see what happened to the Jewish settlers. That was in his book from 1932. Look good because later on I show you pictures of nowadays. And in one picture he's seen talking to this. You remember the white hair person from the last slide. is talking to him on the entrance to his estate in Margot, also in that time. And now we are coming to the Jewish, let's say, conspiracy of conquering Cyprus. That was the idea. That was the idea of David Strich, or David Strich, a very interesting person, a true Zionist from Germany, from Berlin, and he came with the idea that Cyprus might be a springboard for the Jews who were persecuted in East Europe for many years, but were prevented from coming in Palestine by the Turkish or by the Ottoman authorities. Not the Turkish, the Ottoman authorities. And he and some other quite famous people like Martin Buber, for example, were associated in a group which thought that we should seek for a temporary shelter for the Jews, exactly as Herzl did vis-a-vis Uganda in his negotiations with Joseph Chamberlain, Minister of Colonies at the time. And Strich said, why to go to Uganda? Why to go so far away? We have to remain close to Palestine in order to be prepared for the opportunity to get a secure piece of land for the Jews. We have to understand, and it's really, I don't know, in brackets or not in brackets, we have to understand the whole Zionist motivation came or let's say was generated throughout the late 19th century from many or due to many reasons. Some of them had to do with the persecution of the Jews. Some of them had to do with the inner situation of the Jewish people, or the inner crisis of the Jewish modernism vis-a-vis conservatism. Those who thought that there is no chance to remain in Eastern Europe, and in the West Jews in Germany or in Britain came to their help in different ways. And one of the way was in a very tiny stream at that time among the whole set of ideas how to rescue the Jews from the destiny in Eastern Europe, the Ostjuden, as Herzl named it at that time. One of the miserable East Jews of that time, one of the very tiny, let's say, stream was the Zionist idea, that the only place in which the Jews might be rescued or found shelter or found their own and have to their revival, national revival, should take place in Palestine itself. It looked at that time very far away from materialization or from more than a vision, maybe a dream. And this is why out of 2.5 million Jews who left East Europe at this period, only 12,000 arrived Palestine in 1882 and another 20 in 1892. And toward First War, there were only 55 Jews in Palestine. 55,000, sorry. So we have, slight difference. So we have to think that when somebody like Strich came with the idea about Cyprus, it was another idea among many other how to really get some salvation for the Jews of this period. If we don't understand it, if somebody doesn't understand it, it just doesn't understand the whole history of Israel, Zionism, and of course the whole region. So Strich, who was one of the bizarre people, he was not so central figure in the Zionist Congress. When he raised the idea in 1898 to go to in the second or the third Congress, Zionist Congress, when he raised the idea of coming to Cyprus or to, as he said at that time, Greater Palestine, also in other regions around Palestine, he was thrown up from the stage. They didn't let him finish his address. No. Palestine. But behind the curtains, as many diplomats know how it goes, Herzl negotiated with Chamberlain about Uganda. So this Strich dared to come to Chamberlain and put himself like a representative of the Jewish people. Why not? Everybody is representing the Jewish people. Who voted Herzl? He gathered people who voted him. So he came and said, I have a better idea. Why to go to Uganda? It will be good for Britain, and it will be good for Cyprus to let the Jews find a temporary shelter, not to conquer, a temporary shelter in Cyprus. And he wrote a book or booklet about it. It's here, not far away in the archive, your National Archive. You can read it. And there are people here who know this archive much better than I do. And this brochure is it makes sense. It's good, it's win-win-win situation if you think about his logic. He didn't ask the people of Cyprus about it, of course. Yeah? And, you know, among colonialists, there are no, sometimes we don't have to ask people what to do. So he came with the idea, and in order to show that he is right, he even persuaded Jews to settle in Margot, and came and negotiated with the ruler of Cyprus, the commissioner of Cyprus, to give them help. At that time, there was a lot of irrigation projects in the Mesoria, and a lot of ideas, and later on came the first railway between Famagusta and Nicosia. So he thought there is good chance to engage those people with this kind of public work, and that will be good for everybody. And, you know, he was a very funny from political point of view, but he wrote one of the very best book about Cyprus. You see, this is the brochure. The future of Cyprus is much depend on the fate of the Jews, and of course for Britain. And in order to promote the idea, he not just researched Cyprus. You can read it. I don't have to read it for you, but you see that even settled some or created some farm not far away from Pila. You say Pila? Pila? Yeah, Pila for Oklini, not far away from Larnaca. It is named Ridel Chiflik, and only Evangelia told me, exactly showed me on a map where it is. Nothing is there. It's an empty land. Exactly as his idea, by the way. It much reflects the idea. An empty idea. But he tried to show it. This kind of people really motivated a lot of the, let's say, ideas and the spirit of the period, and reflect the spirit of the period. And when we study history, we have to go and to put ourselves in the shoes of history. Not to be so smart from nowadays to say, yeah, well, he was a funny... At that time, it sounds logic. And this is why the minister, a minister in the British cabinet, Joseph Chamberlain, not just a clerk somewhere, was ready to negotiate and to surprise Herzl with this. But on that Congress, Herzl was also let down, Entrich was let down, Ridel Chiflik was also dissolved, and he... I don't want to go too much. He created, you see, a lot of propaganda in Berlin and in other places. And if you read it, it really might be sound like something very, very serious, because they really thought that Cyprus, as a piece of the Orient, is also as a piece of Greater Palestine, and we should find there our, let's say, springboard to the future Palestine. By the way, this is his book. It's in German, but if somebody is reading German, it's still one of the very, very good research which was carried out about Cyprus at the beginning of the 20th century. A lot of information. Anything you want, you can find in this book about Palestine. This is the place in which he tried to create his... I don't want to go too far with my lecture, because some of the things will be covered tomorrow by Evangelia, but there is a linkage, and I wanted really to show that there is a linkage, there is a continuation between those efforts which I described and the economic enterprises which took place, this time from the side of Palestine in Cyprus. Not only Jews who came from Eastern Europe or Britain, but Jews who came from Palestine, pure Zionists, if you want. And again, it goes back to the other side of the coin here. Cyprus and Palestine with the water in between. Because when the economic situation in Palestine prospered at the beginning of the 1930s, let's say, and the situation and land became very, very expensive, especially land along the coastal plain, which was good for citrus plantation, oranges, grapefruits, and so on. That was the #1 export branch of the Palestinian economy of the 1930s. It's now like the Israeli high-tech, if you want. That was the locomotive of the whole Palestinian economy, both for the Arabs and for the Jews. The Jaffa is very famous due to the Arab Jaffa oranges around Jaffa, but the coverage, the area which was covered by citrus plantation by Jews and Arabs was almost a huge piece of land between nowadays Hadera or midway Haifa, Tel Aviv, down to Rehovot, Rishon LeZion, south to Tel Aviv as well. Nowadays everything is, the citrus plantation in Israel went far away to the Negev because water is no more this kind of problem as it was at the time. So it was very, very expensive to purchase piece of land which was fit for citrus plantations, and then they just crossed the water once again. And suddenly there was a vacant land which was belonged to the Jews, to the Jewish Colonization Association. And this is how Dr. Brun, who was a medical doctor, he was one of the founders of the hospital Hadassah, very famous hospital in Israel nowadays, and the one who took care for the malaria in the area of Hadera, he came. There was also, I think it will be mentioned also tomorrow, I wouldn't go into details about the Ottawa Agreement, which gave priority to British Dominion regions, and this is why Jews were attracted to invest in Palestine and all these kind that we are going to listen tomorrow in Koklia, Dr. Brun's initiative, and around Limassol later on. And as I said before, persecution in Nazi Germany, once again there were ideas about negotiating with Britain of letting Jews to escape from Germany. There was an organization in Berlin, Treue Hand, the loyal hand, if you want to translate it, in order to bring Jews to Cyprus. This is some photos of Brin and his initiative. I really don't want to go into details, but you can see that in the Israeli, or let's say the Jewish newspapers of the time, you can see this kind of advertisement to recruit people to come to work in Palestine. And thank you for this slide with your courtesy. This is in Hebrew, but you see it's German Jews to Cyprus in 1935. There will be maybe a transfer of Jews to Cyprus, but it died a couple of days after it was published. Nobody wanted even to think about it. A few photos about the history and the nowadays situation. This is a very famous family, Shapira family from Kuklia. He was one of the richest guys in Cyprus at that time. He was the very first one to have a tractor. You say tractor also? We think that we initiated it, but of course it's not in Hebrew. And he was the first one to have a tractor in Cyprus. Think about it. And he was living in Kuklia with his wife, very proud for his plantations. I still don't know. I brought it, on purpose, because we are dealing still, Evangelia and me and other people who are asking themselves, somebody knows this house somewhere? Some of the Cypriot people know about something about this house. This is because in our documentation, it is the Jewish Colonization Association headquarters in Kuklia, but we are not sure that it's even in Cyprus. Maybe they published it wrongly in their records. We don't know. So I brought it just to maybe somebody will come across this kind. This is the place nowadays of Kuklia, and if you go into some areas, you can for people who are coming from Israel, this kind of Washingtonians trees are really familiar to us when we are getting closer to the Jewish settlements of the 19th century or the beginning of the 20th century, like in Pardes Chana, Binyamina, Zichron Yaakov. And if you are getting closer, you can see there is a huge house there. Getting around, getting into the entrance, getting in, looking for the door, coming to the door, and you can see the mezuzah nails on the entrance to the room. So it must have been one of the Jewish family estates in Kuklia. We are still also looking exactly for the role of ownership. It's abandoned. You asked about other abandoned places. It's abandoned. I don't know who owns it now, but it's open. Everybody can come and take everything he wants from this place. But in the collective memory, we'll talk later on about memories and commemoration. In the collective memory, if you're going to the cafe there and you ask people there, some of the old people will take you to this one and to some other, which I didn't bring the photos in order to show you what's going there. As I said before, Cholomikchi became an agricultural farm, and this is Margot. That was the main Jewish settlement from this is Google. Everybody can look at this from the Google. And actually we were looking for the cemetery at the beginning, and this on this side you see ruins of houses, and here you can see kind of thing that if you are getting closer, you can see the fence. You see here, and actually it's, as I said before, that was the last stop of the Turkish troops in 1974. They occupied this cemetery. They built there kind of a post, I don't know what, and it brought some damages, not to the due to the firing, but due to the maintenance of the place. And the nowadays line is going here. So it's on the line, but we can't get there, and you have to go only by special permission. And inside, it's also not in a very good situation, as you can see. And this is the woman which I mentioned before, Shapira, and other Jewish tombstones there. Here again. That was the place in which the first died detainees were brought to from Xilotimbo and from Famagusta and from Dekelia. They were brought to because that was the only, at that time, the only Jewish cemetery in Cyprus. And if you go inside the village, you still see, remember the photo of Yosef Weitz? You still see some ruins which really looks the same if you compare the photos. And yes, we try to bring our students from time to time, but it's not so easy. So all in all, we are still remain with the question, what was Cyprus? Really, what was Cyprus for the Zionists or for the Jews who tried to settle here and to establish a presidency? I mean, not a forced one, as those who were sent to the camps. And the question is still be open to research. It's not so easy even to trace what the settlers left after when they left here. Again, you are talking about commemoration. Thank you, Rector. About the commemoration, and you're asking about the collective memory and if people are aware to this or that. I think that if you are going to ask 99.9% of the Israelis of nowadays, Jewish Israelis, nobody would tell you that there was even one Jewish settlement in Cyprus. It's kind of a hidden history which was just revealed due to this program and due to this project. And you can see here young researchers who are dealing with this, and this is the except of the Israeli side, that is actually the most encouraging point in the shared history of our people, of our two countries. It still have to be researched, to be published, and to come into the collective, not just memory, awareness of the population and the communities in both sides, because as you can see, it's very rich. And once you penetrate it, you find more and more, even more questions and even more debates, but still a lot to do in this regard. Thank you very much.
Now we've got some time for questions for Professor Banerjee. It was a very, very rich and full presentation. Please.
You mentioned Vila and a chief village. What was the name? I didn't get the name.
Ridel Chifli. Ridel. It is R-I-D-D-E-L-L. I think it was a British officer. He was a British captain or something like this. Like this, you know better.
He was a British consul.
Consul, right, in Larnaca.
In Larnaca, yes.
In Larnaca, yeah. Then he tried to establish some estate, yes.
He had his chieflik in Vila.
Indeed.
Okay, because I know some people have mentioned now they know about this chief they worked from my village.
I think they were working not far away by the Hasidov family, which you'll talk about it, yeah?
Can you please come to
You'll see.
I'm sorry, yes, sorry. Yeah, there were later on, with the Cyprus wave, there was another Jewish initiative, or Jews who came from Palestine initiative not far away, and maybe they had some piece of their land in this area and some in the surroundings of Larnaca. Yeah.
because the locals of my
Ye-
village used to work with this.
So please take notes, document it. It's very important.
Okay, and just for your information, I think it's Margot or Buglia that you mentioned. I met a Turkish Cypriot who said his mother and father worked in that.
Yeah, I know in Kuklia, I know him. I know some of people of Kuklia.
He's not.
He's from
He's from Pergamos village.
in Pergamos.
His mother
On
and
the one.
father
Ah,
fell in love in the orchard. Yes, in the orchard. And so he is half Turkish Cypriot and half Greek Cypriot.
Okay.
That's an amazing story.
good. So if you have some information, I'd be very happy to learn about it. Because I met some people from Kuklia, and even have some Sudanese families who are working in some places there. They have in their family tradition this contact with the Jewish settlers.
One question for you said the name, but I'm not familiar with this.
Who?
Olmaki.
Cholemkchi.
That's the Turkish name, isn't it?
Yeah, but at that time it was also, as I said before, it was a kind of a Turkish hamlet, so to speak, very small village.
It doesn't come up on the internet. Is there another name for it?
No. It's the name. It's in the maps of Cyprus of the time. It's a very, very tiny village. It's close to the what's the name of the airport? The airport there? Timbu. Yes, it's north to Timbu. It's about 5-6 kilometers north to Timbu, and on the fence of the what's the name of the airport there? The north side. The Erkan. Yes, on the fences. Yeah.
And also, Margot, is it with a G or with a K?
G. Margot, by the way, if you go there, there are two places which maps will indicate. Margot goes back to the 18th century. There is still there a small chapel or a kind of a church, which the military, I would say, abuse it now, as they put there a kind of a they store their gas and oil around. They keep it. The building is there. So they name it Margot.
With a G.
G. Yes, Margot.
And also Orides, I just found it on Google. I don't know if it seems to be with a T. Orides. But
yeah, but in the
I think
historical
I think I have made it in some readings, but I wasn't sure. I thought it was a mistake by me.
No. Since you are right, but most of the maps will say D, and in the historical documents it's D, 100%. Yeah. There are some, you know, now there is an agriculture and there is this windmills up there, a farm of windmills.
You know, Professor, there is also a positive. We are indebted to Anjou, speaking about this period. In the old times, as they say, Cyprus, one of the problems was locust. There were many clouds of locust. They were eating everything. The usual method was for the government to say, I buy one bag of locust for 1, 2, 3 pennies. But it didn't work. There were other solutions, fire, or the crucial solution was proposed by a Jew.
Oh.
He proposed to put 2 sticks on the ground. The line between them was to be vertical to the direction that the locust was moving, and a cloth connecting the 2 sticks. So when the locusts were moving, we were forced to go left and right, and there was a pit, a hole in the ground.
Really?
They were falling there and they were collected, they were destroyed.
Never
So
heard
this
about
was
it.
the crucial proposal to get rid Cyprus of the locust.
Thank you. I never heard about it. Yes, please.
Is it a coincidence that the Jews chose to? Is it a coincidence that the Jews chose to stay in 2 villages with the same name, Kukya, or does the name Kukya have anything to do?
One didn't know about the other. No. There are difference between the groups, and they were not connected in a way that was there when they came here to purchase the piece of land. That because there were a lot of swamps at the time there. Nowadays it's irrigated. You can see still a lot of eucalyptus there. So it was a very, very cheap, I think, low price of land. This is why the JCA, and the first thing they did was to irrigate it. Not to irrigate, so to drain it. Sorry.
Thank you for your paper. I wanted to ask one question about the internal politics of the. I'll speak without microphone. I want to ask with the microphone. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One question about the internal politics of these Jewish settlements.
Yeah.
Where did they fit into the various Zionist streams? Were they general Zionists? Were they religious Zionists? Or does the documentation that you have allow you to make any kind of?
Yeah. Well, we know every family a lot about it. There were no. First of all, they came from different places. It was not one community. There were Jews from Romania, Jews from Bessarabia, Jews from South Russia, and some families came from Poland, which was under of course the Russian Empire at the time. Those sites. There were no. They were quite. I would say most of them were. They kept tradition, but they were not part of, let's say, the religious streams within the Zionist one. And the main experts, or those who were really agriculturists, were educated in Mikveh Israel in Palestine. It was the agricultural school, which was founded in 1870 already, and those who finished those schools were sent to settle in different villages in Palestine and in Cyprus. The first 5 families, so totally, let's say, non-tradition. But they kept tradition here. They kept the Jewish. They kept the Hebrew calendar, and as I said before, they educated the children on the Hebrew language. This is why, when Palestine was opened, they just left.
One or two names, first of all. Mr. Liddell was a consul, a British consul, during the late Ottoman Empire, in the Ottoman period in Cyprus in the early 1870s. Margot, not to be confused with Margui, there is not village Margui, that's another one. Anyway, I want to thank you very much for expounding the close relationship and the connections that exist and always existed between Cyprus and the Jewish people. In fact, it goes back to, as I'm sure you know, back to the Old Testament, when the great grandson of Noah was the first settler of Cyprus, Chittim, and the island bears was named Chittim after him. That was the first connection recorded between Cyprus and Israel. But right through the ages to the present day, there was always a very close connection between the two countries and the two peoples. I can only mention during the uprising, during the Roman period in 115 AD, and then there were Jewish people in Cyprus during the Venetian period and during the Turkish period. So this is very interesting what you presented to us. I personally would like to see research done throughout the whole period of history between Cyprus. Of course, I know it's a huge job. I don't know how much writing there is during this whole period, but I think it's worth going into it. And it's very important, I'm sure, because of proximity, geopolitical and geostrategic reasons.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you, and also thank you for helping in the archive. I'll never forget your help there. You are right about it, but there is much more in writing the history of, we name it the Second Temple period, or let's say the Greek-Roman period and the Hellenistic period. Of course, much more researches about it. And there is a young researcher which we invited, but he couldn't come. He got new twins, so he couldn't left the twins and the mother alone there. And he gave a fantastic lecture quite recently. His name is Moshe Yagur, and he gave a fantastic lecture about the whole sequence of relations between Jews and Cyprus throughout history. I'm not talking about ancient periods, as you mentioned before, but from the Hellenistic period up to what I have just begun. I mean, to the end of the 19th century. So he filled in the gap. And there are other researchers who are doing a lot in archaeology, of course in prehistory, but this is not between the people, but between the countries. So actually, as Ambassador already said before, we have a lot to do. Leave aside diplomatic, political, and other issues. We have a lot to do together from cultural, educational, research, and many other points of view. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll have to give Rina.
I think we're now out of time for with even the question. A rare pleasure. And now it's time to go on to the second in a few minutes at least. I think we can have something like 5 minutes break and then go to the attention memory session, the case of the Jewish detentors camps in Cyprus, where I will give up the chair to Professor Kocham. Well, 5 minutes. 5 minutes break then.
Somalian, Kashmir.